All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of Vyzer Visionaries. I am super excited to have our next guest, Brian Davis, on the show with me, calling in from Peru, which is pretty random, but I'm super excited to dive into all that and unpack it. So, Brian, welcome on board and give us some background about who you are and why you're in Peru.
Oh, Litan, thank you so much for having me on the show. So my wife and I moved abroad 9 years ago now in 2015. And we thought that we were just going to have this little 2 year stint, like a little sabbatical or whatever, move to Abu Dhabi for 2 years and then move back to, just step back into our lives in the States. We're from Baltimore originally. And so we rented out our home fully furnished with all of our stuff in it, and we had all of our camping supplies and holiday decorations and stuff packed away in the basement. And that was 9 years ago. We're still abroad. We've lived in several countries since then, and sold our house, sold off all the furniture, and all those all the Christmas decorations and all that stuff. That's all gone now, and we love the expat life. It's fun. We get to travel around. Our daughter was born in Brazil. She's a Brazilian citizen, has dual citizenship, two passports. And of course, real estate helps all of this. We will tie it back to real estate eventually, I promise. But yeah, no, it's been a fun adventure. So yeah, we're in Peru now. We were in Brazil. We were in Abu Dhabi before that, and we've done a lot of travel to places in between as well.
All right, hold on. Let's back up for a second. All right, so you're from Baltimore, and
From
then
Baltimore.
you met your wife probably in the States,
Yep.
right? And then at some point, you guys found yourselves in Abu Dhabi. Like, give us a story about that.
Yeah, so my wife knew that I had some wanderlust, that I wanted to travel and ideally live abroad for a little bit, or at least do a lot more international travel. So she's a school counselor. She knew that there's a huge community of international schools around the world, English-speaking international schools. And she signed up for a headhunting service, a recruiting service for international schools without even telling me about it, as sort of a surprise for me. And then, kind of sprung it on me one day and is like, hey, there's a job fair for international schools in a month from now in Boston. Let's go up there for the weekend and let's just see what happens. And, see what kind of job offers I get around the world. And I said, all right, I'm in, let's do it. And, sure enough, within one day of getting to this job fair, she had a bunch of job offers from around the world. We liked the look of a school that offered her a job in Abu Dhabi. And we said, why not? Let's go. Let's go move to the Middle East and, and have fun and travel. And
So hold on,
that's
hold on.
how
All right.
that came about in the
So
first
you're in
place.
Baltimore. Your wife heads up tells you we're going up to Boston to this fair. At that point, were you in real estate or were you in somewhere else? Like, what were you doing at that point?
Yeah. So at that point, I owned, I guess, 15 rental properties. And I was also working full time for an online e-commerce company that served like mom and pop landlords, mom and pop real estate investors. And that was a fully remote job. So I thought that I was totally secure in that I could move anywhere in the world, still earn money, not worry about it. And then, within a few months of us moving to Abu Dhabi, the owner of that company didn't like that I had moved outside the states and fired me. So that was jarring in itself. I thought that it wouldn't be a problem me moving abroad. I was like, oh, I'll just make sure that I can make meetings or whatever, and it'll be fine. It was not fine for him. So I found myself on the other side of the world with no network over there, no job, no income, at least no active income, and decided to start my own business at that point because I never wanted to feel that feeling of like helplessness again. I mean, that's a terrible, we've all been there, right? We've all lost a job at some point in our lives. And it's a really helpless feeling where it becomes so glaringly obvious how dependent you are on someone else to live, right? To pay your bills. So I didn't want that to happen ever again. So I went out and started Spark Rental. Of course, I didn't realize at the time just how much harder it is to start a business than it is to just go get a job. It's way harder to start a business, but it's also rewarding in many ways as well. So that's how Spark Rental came about. A former colleague and I got together, and we wanted to start an online platform for mom and pop real estate investors. Our initial vision was a property management platform for small time landlords, people with just a handful of units. And we did build one eventually. It did not come about the way we thought it would. We thought that would be our main business, and we hired this web development company to build it out. They ran off with half of our seed capital. And that's the kind of stuff that happens when you're in business, right?
Right.
It's just constant challenges like that. So anyway, long story short, we've been
Right.
abroad for a long time. Real estate has played a role.
But the 15 properties you had or still have in Baltimore, are they still like when you moved to Abu Dhabi, were they like, self-managed? Or do you have a property management company managing them for you?
So I had a property manager. I do not own those properties anymore, and I'll tell you why not. So when I moved abroad, I did have a property manager, but it became clear after I moved across the world just how much I had been subsidizing those properties with my own labor, even though there was a property manager in place. So, I had still been coordinating with the contractors, and I had still been, working with tenants who were difficult to work with. And my nights and weekends had been spent subsidizing these properties, so their returns on paper were artificially inflated. They looked a lot better than they were because I hadn't been taking into account my time and my labor that I've been putting into those properties. And after I was forced to look at those with a little bit of a colder, distant view, I had to admit to myself, these returns are terrible. Like it's not passive income. If I'm taking my own time and labor into account, it's terrible returns. And now that I can't do that anymore, being across the world, these properties are just not performing well. So I ended up selling off those properties, but being the co-founder of a business that served real estate investors, and we were teaching courses on real estate investing, I didn't feel comfortable doing that without being a real estate investor myself. And that's how I got into passive real estate investing, which is what my main focus is today as an investor. I've invested in almost every real estate crowdfunding platform out there, at least that allows non-accredited investors, invested in dozens of real estate syndications and notes and funds and all that kind of stuff. But I discovered that out of necessity, being overseas, wanting to get rid of my actual rental properties, but still wanting to be a ongoing real estate investor. I was going to say active real estate investor, but that's now I'm messing up my terms here. I still want to invest in real estate month in and month out, but I had to figure out a new way to do that. And that's how our investment club was actually born. I wanted to invest in real estate syndications. I was pretty excited about them, but they come with a huge minimum investment, typical 50 grand, 100 grand, sometimes 250 grand or more as a minimum investment. So I wanted to invest in these, didn't want to invest that much. So we created an investment club where we get together every month. We look at these deals together and we go in on them as a club. And whoever wants to go in on them can do so with 5 grand or more. And together we'll hit that 250 grand minimum or whatever it is. But each of us only has to invest a small amount. So in that way, I can still dollar cost average my investments, right? I can still invest every single month in different properties, different markets, different types of properties, without having to put 100 grand at a time in a property.
Got it. All right. I briefed the background on Spark. Interesting stuff. Let's go back to Abu Dhabi.
Yeah.
You're in Abu Dhabi and you get those properties that are passive income aren't that passive and becomes a mess. And was the income they were generating enough for you to maintain your life in Abu Dhabi, or is it, purely dependent on your wife's income?
They were not generating enough income for me to maintain my lifestyle. So since we've been abroad, we've tried to live entirely on my wife's salary and benefits. So school counselors, as you probably know, don't get paid a huge salary, right? I mean, their salary is similar to a teacher's salary. So it's not a high salary, but international educators get amazing benefits. So free furnished housing in many cases, free flights home to the US in many cases, full premium health insurance coverage for the entire family. So we can live a much more comfortable lifestyle overseas on a teacher salary, a school counselor's salary and benefits than if we were trying to do that, to just live on my wife's income and benefits in the US. So since we've been abroad, we've been trying to do that and then save and invest all of my income. Now, I mentioned earlier that Spark Rental had a ton of challenges trying to get off the ground, get it launched. Again, like half of our seed capital went out the window when a developer ran off with it. So my partner and I, we didn't want to take out a loan. We didn't want to take in venture capital. So we had to find ways of extending the runway. So I started adding income on the side, as did my partner. So for me, it was freelance writing, which ended up actually helping me in many other ways beyond just the money. Um, it made me a better investor. It forced me to learn new things every day as I'm writing about investing, about personal finance, about real estate. It forced me to stay on top of the real estate market every single day and learn about different real estate crowdfunding platforms, for example, that are coming on the market every day. I'm reviewing these sites for our own blog, for other people's blogs. So I was like, yeah, I'll invest a little bit of money in this myself and see how it is firsthand, and then I can speak from firsthand experience with some of these platforms. So it made me a better investor in that sense, and of course, it provided extra income to help get our company off the ground. My partner was a realtor, so she just picked up some of that business on the side. But as an entrepreneur, you have to find ways to extend the runway if you're not taking in outside capital, right? So for us, it just made perfect sense to pick up a little bit of side hustle income. And all that stuff made us better founders and entrepreneurs in the process.
I think that, one of the notions that people have about expats and people that, work remotely or live abroad and make an income is the whole, gig economy or content creators, people that are really good at writing or creating content can really make money off of that, enough many times to live. And so, and I love that you found your passion, not just to invest in real estate, but to write about that. And I'm sure you've learned a lot. And also, that's like pure passive income, especially if you have affiliates and stuff like that, right? What
Oh yeah,
started first? So when you moved to Abu Dhabi, what began first? First was Spark Rental, and then the content creation, or the other way around?
no. So Spark Rental came first, and then at a certain point, we reached this point where we're not profitable yet. We don't have, we're running out of money, running out of our seed capital, and we had to figure out how are we going to keep the lights on, basically. So that's when I went out and I started picking up freelance writing gigs, which again came with some side benefits beyond just the money. I mean, it made me a much better writer. So for our blog, for our company blog, you know, the fact that I'm writing every day for other people's blogs and websites, that practice, if you're writing 10,000 words a week, which I was, just makes you're going to get better, right? You're going to become a better writer, and that helped me quite a bit in our business as well. So actually, I still do a little bit of freelance writing to this day. We don't need the money anymore for the business, but I enjoy it, and it helps my wife sleep at night, knowing that there's
Right.
some kind of income floor. Because when you own a business, as you know, that income and that revenue and expenses are a roller coaster. They're constantly up and down. And for a certain type of person with anxiety, that can trigger it, right? Or it can make your life a little harder. So yeah, so I picked up the freelance writing after launching Spark Rental, but before Spark Rental was profitable. And it's really been a good thing, both for our business and for me personally.
Cool. All right. So you're in Abu Dhabi, you get this thing off the ground, Spark Rental's off the ground, you're writing. And then at some point, does your wife's contract end and you decide to move back to the States, or like when did that end in Abu Dhabi? And also another question is, Abu Dhabi, where do you live? Is like cost of living more expensive or low? Obviously you have benefits and things that are covered by her company. But I have this like, I don't know why, but this stigma that there are those places in the Middle East are actually really expensive. Is that correct or no?
So a couple, that's a it's a complicated answer in some ways. So most of cost of living is housing, right? So if you're getting free housing, which we were,
Okay, right.
then that takes care of the bulk of the differences in cost of living. Now there are some distortions in the market when you're living in the Middle East, and in particular in the UAE. So, for example, if you like wine, like I do, they charge enormous import tariffs on alcohol, right? So you can get alcohol in the UAE, which you can't in a lot of Arab countries, by the way. But in the UAE, you can. You're just going to pay double for it than you would pay in the US.
But it's
So
only for people, it's only for foreigners because Muslims don't drink wine.
correct. And you're actually supposed to get an alcohol license there that
No
you
way.
show at the liquor store. Now we never did because they didn't actually. If you were visibly not Arab, they didn't actually ask for your alcohol license. But you're supposed to get an alcohol license proving that you are not a Muslim, basically, because they're not allowed by law to sell alcohol to Muslims. So yeah,
Interesting.
there's some quirks like that. Um, you can live a very affordable life in the UAE, in Dubai or Abu Dhabi, or you can live a really outrageous lifestyle there. And if you see movie scenes where people are partying, at
Yeah.
like the 135th floor of a skyscraper in Dubai or something, you can live that lifestyle and it's really expensive, or you can live a
Right.
more down to earth lifestyle. They're like anywhere. What I will say about living there, one of the things that was cheaper there than almost anywhere in the world is air travel, because the Abu Dhabi and Dubai airports are travel hubs that connect Africa, Europe, and Asia. So you get these really good direct flights to all over those three continents at pretty good prices, because so many intercontinental flights are routed through there. So
Interesting.
that's cheaper there. Alcohol is obviously more expensive there. But again, cost of living, the bulk of that is housing. So
Right.
if you're not paying for housing, you're most of the way there as far as not having to worry about the difference in cost of living.
I love it that there's such a good benefit of being a teacher these days. Like you really need good people to be teachers, and it's hard to incentivize it. So that's amazing. By the way, the wine story reminded me. So my last company, we did 3D imagery for diamonds. Anyway, long story short, but I'm not going to dive into it. But anyway, we had an office in India, in Mumbai, and I remember we had a general manager that we hired from there, and we'd go back and forth a lot. And this is like crazy. One of the most expensive things that you're surprised about is toilet paper. Because Indians don't buy toilet paper. And so it's like one of those things only foreigners buy. It's like
Right, so
it's
they mark
crazy.
it up double. Yeah.
Exactly. Just like the wine thing. Like if it's only for foreigners like gringos. And anyway, so interesting. All right. So you're in Abu Dhabi, you're there for a few years, and then what ended that period?
So international educators, what they typically do contract wise is a 2-year initial contract with the school and then year by year renewals. So we ended up being there for 4 years. We decided that we were ready for the next chapter. We were ready for a change. So my wife started interviewing with other schools around the world, got a job offer at a school in Brasilia, the capital of Brazil, and we moved there and spent the next 4 years there. And we spent the pandemic there. It was actually the perfect place to spend the pandemic because it's warm all year round. So every restaurant, cafe, bar, coffee shop, they all have outdoor seating, right? So it was a great place to be during the pandemic. Um, but yeah, our daughter was born there. She got Brazilian citizenship for life, being born there. So she has two passports. Um, it was, yeah, so after 4 years there, we were ready to move on again. And last year we moved
Wait,
to
hold on,
Lima,
hold on, hold
Peru.
on. Don't move on yet to Peru. Hold on.
Yeah, okay, yeah,
All
yeah,
right.
yeah.
All right. So you're in Brazil. You just moved from UAE. Did you go through the US before that? Like, did you go? I don't know. Do you meet your partner, your business partner so often? Like, do you go do some business in the US, or is it just like constant abroad and you don't even visit that much?
So we aim to spend 6 to 8 weeks a year in the US. So we try to go home for the holidays and we try to go home in the summer for at least, 3 or 4 weeks at a time. So yeah, every year we're spending between a month and a half to 2 months in the US, just spending time with family every single year, regardless of where we're living in the world.
And
So
the business from a business standpoint, did you need to be in the US, or you could have just stayed abroad and just continued everything you did from UAE and then from Brazil?
well, I tell you what was hard about living in the UAE from a business standpoint was the time difference.
Right,
So
right.
in the winter time in the UAE, it's a 9 hour time difference to the east coast of the US, 12-hour time difference to the west coast of the US. So I mean, there were times when I was delivering webinars at like 3 in the morning my time in the UAE. And that was hard. As you know, doing a lot of business in the US yourself and living in
Right.
Israel. So
Right.
yeah, that time difference, that's tricky. So that was one of the reasons why I was very excited to move to South America and have a negligible time difference to the US. So that made a big help. I tell you what has increasingly been a challenge for me is the difficulty in attending conferences. So we're at a point in our business now where we should be going to FinCon, to Best Ever, to Bigger Pockets. We should be going to those every single year. And it's just really hard for me to be able to do that because I have to fly in from another country. So that is stretching the boundaries, or it's pushing up against the boundaries of our lifestyle a little bit, but that's surmountable. We're hoping to do one conference later this year and then do at least two conferences moving forward starting next year. So but that has been a challenge.
Got it.
But other than that, running an 100% online business these days is not hard. I mean, we can do 99% of the stuff that we want to do totally online with no challenges. It's the conferences where I feel it. But otherwise, it's been easy.
Now in Brazil, were they, because I know you, like Abu Dhabi is really susceptible to foreigners, right? There's a big expat community.
That's an understatement. I mean, it's like 86% of the population are
Right.
expats.
So, but Brasilia, like Brazil overall, doesn't seem like a place. Well, obviously everywhere there's gonna be expats, but it doesn't seem like such a hub to have a ton of expats, right? Or is it, or are there?
No, that's particularly true in Brasilia, which is not a tourist city. It's a government city. I mean, the whole thing is silly. I mean, they it was an intentionally planned city that they built in the middle of nowhere back in the 60s. It's truly in the middle of nowhere. I mean, you are many, many, many hours from anything there. It should have been built in the first place. So there's nothing there other than government work and support services for government work, basically, which not to go on a tangent, but creates this huge disconnect between the government and the population at large in Brazil, because there's just this island of government wealth in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by poverty, basically. Anyway, not to go down a rabbit hole, but
Right.
yeah, so in Brasilia, not a huge expat population. Most of our friends there were people who worked at Katie's school, or at other international schools, or with the embassies. But yeah, small expat community there. That was one of the things that chafed us a little bit about Brasilia. Now, if you go to one of the larger cities in Brazil, like Sao Paulo or Rio, there are larger expat populations, but we weren't there, right? We're in Brasilia in the middle of nowhere. So that was something that we got sick of, and we were ready to move on after a few years.
Well, it took you 4 years to get sick of it, but yeah, all right. That's some time to get used to something. Do you learn Portuguese, or you don't need to? You can get along with English down there.
I got by our fourth year there, I got to be a little embarrassed that I wasn't really speaking Portuguese. Brazilians would ask me, "Oh, how long have you been here?" Expecting me to say like, "Oh, a couple months." And I'm like, 4 years." Like, but I don't really speak Portuguese. I spoke a little bit of Portuguese. Like my restaurant Portuguese was great. My food vocabulary was perfect. But no, so when we moved to Lima, it became a priority for me to learn Spanish, and my Spanish is still quite weak, but I'm getting close. I'm close to conversational now in Spanish, whereas I was never conversational in Portuguese. I could only do transactional conversations in Portuguese.
Right.
Talking to people at the coffee shop or at the grocery store. So I understood numbers and food vocabulary and restaurant vocabulary and stuff like that. But
All right. All right. So quick recap. All right. So you're in the U.S. in Baltimore. Your wife gets off, decides she has just go on a whim. She wants to work somewhere else in the world. Goes up to Boston to this job fair. Next day, she gets a job offer, and you guys probably a few weeks later, whatever, how long later you get on a plane, you move to Abu Dhabi. You're in Abu Dhabi for a few years. You have this great experience, great from a financial standpoint as well. But time zone wise and because of stability of the work, you decide to look for another job in South America, sorry, and you find yourself in Brasilia. You're in Brasilia for 4 years, language in the middle of nowhere. And for 4 years, you decide you want to relocate to somewhere place new. Is that same sort of the story, or was there something else motivating you to move to another country from that point?
No, yeah, we were just ready to move on. I mean, Brasilia is a small city. It's a really easy city, very walkable city, good weather most of the year. We were ready for a change. Is really what it came down to. But it was a really easy place to live, truly, and it was a great place to have a kid. It was a great place to weather the pandemic. So anyway, we were ready for a change. We were ready for a larger city. So Lima is it's a bigger city than most people realize. I mean, it's comparable to New York or LA size wise. So yeah, a job offer came along for my wife here in Lima. The more we talked to people who lived in Lima, the better it
How long
sounded.
ago? How long ago was this?
So we moved here a little under a year ago.
Okay.
But she was interviewing the previous fall. She was interviewing in October, November of 2022. We moved here in June of 2023. So we've been here for a little under a year now. It's a 2-year initial contract. We'll be here for at least one more school year, and we have to decide this coming October if we want to extend for a third year or not. So that's an ongoing conversation.
Right. I mean, all right. So I traveled South Central America for like 7 months after the military, and I stayed in Lima for like a few weeks. And the cool thing about Peru is there's so many things to do there from a nature perspective, like
Yeah.
everything, like Machu Picchu and Cusco and the Huayhuash and all these other like really cool treks, Ica and sandboarding. I was just like, it feels like this whole big playground. When you live there, do you also experience that, or is it like a New Yorker who never goes to Central Park or never goes to the Empire State Building?
No, yeah, we have tried to do some travel within Peru, and we have done some. I want to do more. We have been to Cusco and Machu Picchu. Loved both. I mean, Cusco is a great city. Um, Ica, we did go to Ica. I mean, it's a pretty grungy town, and there's
Yeah,
not a ton to do there. There is that oasis with the sandboarding that you mentioned,
right.
and there's some wineries there that are they're trying to get the Peruvian wine industry off the ground, and some of them are making decent wine. Um, but yeah, I mean, there's what they call the Galapagos of Peru, not far from there. You go on these island tours, and there's penguins and sea lions and seabirds and all that kind of stuff. Some beautiful beach resorts. So yeah, but like you said, there's jungle and rainforest. There's Amazon here in Peru. There's the Andes Mountains and great hiking. There's a ton of stuff to do in Peru in a pretty compressed geographical area. So in less than an hour flight from Lima, you can get anywhere in Peru and be in desert, mountains, jungle, rainforest, beautiful beaches. So it's a pretty easy place to get around and do a lot of different types of outdoor activities. To your point.
Right. And I guess also, yeah, obviously your housing is paid for, but I'm assuming cost of living there is probably the cheapest of the three, or is Brasilia cheaper in terms of like everything, around it?
Um, it's probably comparable to Brasilia. I mean, Brasilia is distorted because it's all this government money. But here in Lima, I mean, we live in a mediocre 3 bedroom, 2 bathroom urban apartment with $1 million view, an 180-degree view of the Pacific Ocean.
Wow.
So, I mean, yeah, it's if we were in the US with that view, I mean, that apartment or condo would cost us many, many millions of dollars. And for here, I mean, we get to live there for free because of Katie's job. But if we were paying market rent, the market rent for this apartment is like $1,300 a month, and it
Wow.
has a stunning ocean view. So, yeah, I mean, cost of living here is quite affordable, especially given the size of the city. I mean, there's like 12 million people
Right.
who live here.
So, I mean, I know for me and a lot of people that I know, when you visit places around the world, you can't stop to think about the opportunities that they have and from an investment standpoint, right? Like, because not everyone is in the mindset of like, wow, this can be leveraged to do that and make this amount of money. And our gears always start to turn. And obviously, there's the shiny object syndrome, like, oh, I should do this, and I should do it. Like, have you experienced that over the three cities you've lived in terms of like, why don't we do something here? Because there's a lot of opportunity.
So I have not invested in any of the countries where we've lived. And I'll tell you why. I almost invested money in a Brazilian real estate crowdfunding platform. Um, I didn't end up doing it. So here's the problem with investing in international real estate. I mean, even if you, this is aside from going out, like the challenges in actually going out and buying physical properties, which, obviously there are challenges with that too, from a regulatory standpoint, legal standpoint. But even if you were to invest passively in other countries, you have some risks that you don't have when you invest in US real estate or even other developed countries' real estate. So one is currency risk, right? The local currency could get completely devalued. And that's totally outside of your control as an investor. I mean, of course, the value of the US dollar or the euro or the pound, that fluctuates as well, but not the way that developing countries' currencies fluctuate, right? So you've got that volatility and currency risk in developing countries. You also have political risk. So within a month of Katie, my wife, taking the job here in Peru, all of these protests and unrests and riots and bad things started happening here in Peru. Katie's freaking out, and that ended up calming down by the time that we moved here. But the president of Peru was arrested in the middle of the night because he was trying to abolish the Congress. He was trying to abolish the legislative branch of the government. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that you hope not to see in a developed country, right? And that it might occasionally happen in a developed country, but it happens a lot more in developing countries, right? That political risk. And then there's also the legal risk. I mean, anyone who invested in private property in Venezuela, for example, a lot of that stuff got nationalized, right? When the property law got totally changed. So you have these extra layers of risk that come in when you buy real estate or just invest passively in real estate in a developing country that you don't have when you invest within the United States or in another developed country, Canada, Europe, Israel, whatever. So those are the reasons why I have not invested in any of these countries where we've lived. I would consider the right passive real estate investment in another country and including a developing country, but I would have to feel really confident in the political situation there, the stability of the currency, stability of rule of law. I'd have to feel really confident in all of that.
So I've done a lot of investing across mainly in Europe and in the US, but also like in other countries in Europe that aren't part of the euro. And I think that I totally agree with the currency risk, with the political risk, the legal risk. But at the end of the day, the biggest issue is finding someone you can trust who has the expertise to overcome all that. And because you're in a position, you've lived, like when you're in Brazil, you've been there for 4 years, you already have your connections. You understand what the legal risks are, the political risks are, the currency, because everyone's, understanding to go if they want to take that risk or not, because there's an upside for that as well. Dollar goes up and down, it goes up and down. I mean, I agree with that, all that. I'm just saying, like, you're in a position where, like, I'd imagine you see an opportunity here. People who have the money to invest it. It'd be cool to, hey, I know a guy, I trust him, and he knows what he's doing. He'll find opportunities. But anyway, that's like probably another whole another topic. But that's really interesting. Awesome. So so you've been in these 3 countries. You've been there for a while doing different things. I'm not going to ask like where you've had the most, like which country you like the most, because I'm assuming it's all trade-offs. But do you think like for the future you'll continuing to hop between countries, or at some point you want the stability of going back to have a home base? That's question number 1. Question number 2 is like, where do you see your company going in terms of sustaining this type of obviously this isn't sustaining because your wife is, but like, can you continue to do this forever?
Yeah. So as far as home base, we are planning on moving back to the US for a year or 2 after Peru. For family reasons. I mean, we want to spend some time with our family, and in particular our parents. They're older but still healthy at this point, so we want to take advantage of that time, while they're still alive, while they're still healthy. So for family reasons, we are planning on moving back to the US, but that will be temporary. At least the plan is that it's temporary. We would like to move abroad again. We love expat life. We'd really like to move to Europe next. We particularly like Eastern Europe and Southern Europe, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. I mean, I never thought that I would have lived in any of these 3 countries before
Right.
we ended up moving there. So we'll see what happens. As far as where Spark Rental is going, so we are scaling up our investment club. We're starting to get to that point where we can start to take advantage of the better return splits on deals based on the volume that we're investing. We're kind of right on that cusp right now. So as we expand, that's one of the things we want to do more of is to qualify for those better return splits on syndication deals. We also, one of our core values has been inclusivity and making the club available to everybody, not just accredited investors. So we only look at deals that allow non-accredited investors as well. But as we grow, we want to add a subsection of the club for accredited investors specifically, so that we can look at those deals too. Those 506C syndication deals, funds that we have not been able to look at yet. So those are really two areas that, as we grow our passive real estate investment club, that we want to take more advantage of and grow into.
Awesome. Brian, this has been really interesting. Different type of unique conversation about, living abroad and investing in real estate and building a business. I really appreciate hopping on. Is there anything you want to share, like how people can reach out to you if they have any questions about living abroad or spark rental or anything in general?
Yeah, so sparkrental.com, of course. You can reach me personally at brian@sparkrental.com. We are very much a mom and pop country or company. It's not like I have a VA answering my emails or anything. So yeah, reach out anytime. You can reach us also on the social platforms. We have huge Facebook groups for active investors and for passive investors, two separate groups. Yeah, don't be a stranger. Reach out.
Awesome. Well, as usual, thank you for joining us. I'm Litan, CEO at Vyzer, and our objective is to help LPs be better investors, invest in good places, and build themselves a better life. Follow us on social media. Give me a shout out. If you need anything, reach out. Thank you so much.